You know, it really is crazy to me that we are actually 2 years in on Elden Ring. I mean, for one, I actually thought this game honestly came out like yesterday. Like every time I jump on it, I'm pretty much having the time of my life playing this game. And insanely enough, we are now going to be 2 years in exactly today on February 25th. It's kind of insane this game actually came out in 2021, but you know, it kind of is insane we're actually going to be in the 2 year anniversary of Elden Ring here on February 25th. I almost feel like this game actually came out like legit yesterday, but my goodness, every time I jump on this game, it's honestly such a blast. And I do feel like so many people are most likely still going to jump in, or at least even get back on this to really experience it. Now, I do know there's some rumors and stuff that we might actually hear something today on, like, the DLC. When I was recording this, it obviously wasn't on the 25th. But my goodness, though, I was like, you know what? I have to jump back on Elden Ring and play through this game again. And my goodness, every time I go through this game, guys, I always find something new. I did end up finding a few new Ashes of War and a few new spells. I did not even have before, even though I played through the game, I think it's like 10 times, something like that. I probably, most likely could go through a lot more if I actually went through the game quicker and only, killed the bosses you absolutely have to. But luckily, one of the beauties of Elden Ring is going to be the vast, beautiful map we actually have here. I would say it's probably one of the biggest maps and like the best detailed maps I've ever played on. There is going to be so many things not only above the map but under. There's also going to be like two or three little areas like in the underworld of the map as well, to where you basically can go around and kill all kinds of bosses, find like items, and pretty much find anything you possibly can around every map. And I feel like for everybody, it's also going to be one of those things to where you pretty much jump on this game and you go, oh my goodness, there is legit so many things to do. Honestly, every time I get on this game, I'm like, okay, am I missing this weapon? Did I even go to that area? Like earlier, I did end up finding another cave I did not even go in. I was like, wait a second, there's a cave on the other side of this cliff. Every time you jump on, there's always something different to do. And on top of that, though, one of my favorite things about Elden Ring, guys, there is an insane amount of things to go after. I'm honestly going to say something right now that might sound a bit insane, but then again, I feel like pretty much 99% of people are most likely going to agree. Elden Ring is one of the best games we have seen in this decade. The reason why I say one of the best is I would admit GTA 6 is probably like the next huge release, but my goodness, Elden Ring is so dang popular and it still is. Even after 2 years of this game coming out, we do know the DLC is close. As I did mention before, we are most likely going to hear something soon, even though today is obviously going to be the 2 year anniversary of this game. Now, one thing I always do find kind of insane, there is so many different pieces of armor, like weapons to go after. There's going to be all kinds of like different spells pretty much spread around the entire map. You are most likely going to go around and find a new weapon, want to build that one up, and go, oh, wait a minute, I can do this build with this spell, or I can use this weapon with more speed and this armor set. Like, wanting to use a sword for a bit, and then you're like, you know what, let's go use this axe and level this one up and maybe get like a fire or like a freezing ability on it. It really is going to have so many different builds that's almost unlimited, which I would say for pretty much every player is like the best approach. Some people might want to be like an up close and personal like combat type of person, while you also have someone that might want to be like a mage or something like that, so at least you can do all of them and still enjoy the game for everything it does have to offer. I do know on top of that, some people might not enjoy Elden Ring. We do know not every game is for everybody, but for the majority of people I would say that have tried this game seem to love it. And I really feel like it's going to be hard not to love this game. Like, I do know it's going to be very challenging. Some bosses are most likely going to break a controller or two, and you are most likely going to want to head to your local Walmart and maybe pick up a few extra ones, because I feel like some bosses are most likely going to cause you to smash them. Which, funnily enough, I would say at a point, some players might be like, well, yeah, you know what, Blocked, I'm not going to get extra controllers if I do end up breaking one because the game does make me angry. But my goodness, though, isn't that the fun part of it? Like, jumping into, like, a challenge and knowing that boss might take hours, or, like, it's kind of funny to me in Elden Ring, or, like, any Souls game for that matter, that when you jump in, you can actually spend 3 or 4 hours on a boss. That would end up taking around 10 to 15 minutes on a perfect run. I did end up taking around like 4 or 5 plus hours on Dark Eater Madir, back on Dark Souls 3 because I was having so many issues with that dragon, and I feel like a lot of bosses in Elden Ring are most likely going to have the exact same thing. We do obviously know we have the Blade of Miquella or Milena, we also have Radon or however you pronounce his name, and we do have like the Fire Giant, which I have heard that boss has given players issues. And I do know some of these bosses you're probably going to have to be like, you know what? let me go change my build around, let me change to this sword, or like, let me go change my armor around to maybe increase my poise, or, you know, have different like damage and stuff and reductions to like fire. That way you can actually go in and fight certain bosses and most likely not take as much damage. Now, one of the biggest things about Elden Ring, though, is probably going to come down to the insane exploration that you have playing this game. There is going to be an insane 238 bosses around this entire map. Keep in mind that's going to actually be like the dungeons or like the catacombs and the caves pretty much spread out everywhere. There's also going to be pretty much hidden bosses at nighttime that spawn in, like the cavalry or like some of the weird bosses you can only fight in certain parts of the map. It really is insane because no matter where you actually explore to, there is always going to be something to actually fight. Some of the bosses even like fly in from the top of the map, and you obviously have to kill them before you can move on to the next part, which some of them can be an absolute nightmare to actually kill. Like that weird gargoyle type of thing in the snow part of the map, that thing was a nightmare. And being on a higher tiered like playthrough, I did notice it does insane damage. Also being a pretty high level, is crazy how the bosses like 3-shot you. I almost feel like in some ways the enemies and the bosses might scale toward your level. And it's funny though, because every time I do play through the game, I do feel like the enemies and the bosses are most likely more toward your level in certain areas. Do let me know in the comments below if I am not losing my mind on this. But I would say at this point though, if you are going through the game a lot and most likely having lots of playthroughs, and you did end up going after like higher levels and most likely like obviously more leveled weapons to go through like different encounters, can you imagine if the bosses and stuff did not actually scale or anything with you? That would be terrible. And I would feel like a lot of players would most likely not even play through the game multiple times or, you know, even more than once if that was the case. So I would say having the bosses scale in certain areas is obviously a must. And my goodness though, in certain places like Caelid, the bosses are insane. We do all know the bell-bearing hunter in that area is an absolute monster. No matter what level you are, he pretty much destroys you in around 2 to 3 hits. And you can also see things like this in boss fights like Melania, which if you have not gotten to her, you're most likely going to encounter this.
I am Melania, Blade of Mikola. And I have never known defeat.
And even with the challenge that Melania is, I really do feel like, for me at least, it's going to be probably the top 3 for the hardest bosses in the game. I do know a lot of players were mentioning like the Fire Giant being fairly difficult. I did end up beating him on this playthrough though around like my 3rd try. After I stopped being insane, I did start using Torrent, which my goodness, in certain boss fights like Radon, he is super helpful. Can you imagine not having that horse goat thing being able to actually go toward the bosses with? You are most likely going to be running for dear life while the bosses are basically chasing you down. Then they have the nerve to grab you and pretty much instant kill you when they like it. Funnily enough though, Melania also does this as well by basically sticking the sword right through you. And then at that point you also get to hear the lovely line once again, which I would say is probably legit in everybody's brain. What's also kind of funny though is Elden Ring was the one game I did end up playing where I was basically mispronouncing pretty much every boss that was in the game, including like the Ever goals, which funnily enough are going to be in Ever Jail. I did actually look up on some things on Reddit and I was like, well, I was saying that wrong. I was saying this boss fight wrong, and my goodness, it was pretty much every time I did it. But hey, that's most likely going to be the beauty of actually playing through the game, because there is going to be so many bosses you're going to probably go, wait a minute, what is the name of that thing? And then the next instinct is probably going to be like, you know what, you going to learn today, but you're most likely not, and it's probably more the fact of, maybe I am going to learn today after you die 25 times to the exact same boss fight, and then you finally find the way to actually kill them, which is the best feeling ever, and then you're going to jump back in to explore to run into another boss. And with different encounters in the game, you're also going to have to change around like your play style and different ways you actually did fight the other ones, because that is going to be the only way to actually do it. I guess in some ways the challenge really does await, and I absolutely love it. That is also going to bring me to my next point, guys. The Fashion Souls is on point. At first, you're probably going to be like, wait, Block, what does that actually mean? We all do know there is going to be a ton of different armor sets you can wear, and some of the outfits might actually look pretty dang insane, but some of them might not offer like the best defense or something like that, which you might have to change around. But then again, if you are going to be good at like dodging and stuff, you don't necessarily have to worry about that, because you're not going to be getting hit, right? Well, at least you do hope so. We also did see things in like Bloodborne and stuff to where I do think some of the armor sets honestly did not do a dang thing to help you in some of the fights, but hey, at least you're going in there looking like an absolute unit, and you are most likely going to be pretty much showing up insanely early because you're fashionably late, and then the boss is going to kill you and then you're going to be fashionably early because you might look good, but my goodness, the boss does not care whatsoever. And I do feel like having those options in games really is super important. That way every player can like have different upgrades and like change around their armor, looking the way they actually want to, pretty much catering to everyone. And that is probably going to be one of my favorite things about Elden Ring, guys. Like, the content in this game and like the recent years of games we have seen is going to be absolutely unmatched. And when looking at that though, and the amount of things you actually could do in the base game itself, makes me so dang excited for the DLC like announcement and release coming out. And just imagine for a second on the amount of content this DLC is most likely going to have in it. Like, From Software legit never disappoints. There is probably going to be a crazy amount of items to go after, like armor, weapons, caves, dungeons, bosses, and probably a lot more that we don't even know yet. And I cannot even imagine right now what we're actually going to fight in that DLC, guys. Just imagine the enemies we will most likely encounter. I mean, in the game itself right now, we have like tree monsters, which at first I actually thought it was part of the map, then I got hit by one. I was like, wait a second. And I also died, which was unfortunate. And then you'll also run into something like a weird walking like building thing, which funnily enough you can knock down. Did not even know that until like my third playthrough. I know I was a bit slow, but funnily enough you could go into that thing and actually get like different like remembrances from the bosses and unlock like different items with using those, which is insane. It really is crazy the amount of secrets they actually put into these games. We also saw this in like Sekiro, which I love that game as well. We also saw this in like Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, but looking at some of the other enemies we also did find like was like a wolf like dinosaur thing. When I first saw that I was like, what in the world am I looking at, bro? Like, what is that thing? And then funnily enough it also began to kill me as well. Unfortunate. Which, the way I looked at that though is, yes, I did end up dying, but you know what? It's going to be a learning lesson. That way I can't go in and die again, and then hopefully kill them around like the 10th or something try, unless you know it's quicker. Depending on the build and weapons you're using, it obviously would be faster, but my goodness, guys, the amount of things Elden Ring has really is going to be unmatched at this point. And I do know I'm most likely not the only one here, but my goodness, the excitement and hype for that DLC is probably going to be absolutely through the roof. Like, I legit cannot wait to actually see what they end up bringing us. Every game From Software makes, guys, at this point has been so much dang fun, filled with content, and one of my favorite parts ever, which I will also be touching on in future videos more about Elden Ring and also how these games are amazing, is there is not going to be any annoying monetization stuff in this game either, which we do know is a current plague taking over a lot of the gaming industry. Stay tuned for more videos going over that exact same topic. And I do feel like everybody, including myself, is probably going to be hyped beyond belief, and most likely so dang excited to see what they have in store for us with this new DLC coming. I honestly cannot wait, guys. It's probably going to be absolutely incredible. And at this point, though, we also know the upcoming DLC is going to be absolutely massive, and I legit cannot wait to see what they actually bring us. But overall, though, I really guess the biggest thing I can say right now is happy anniversary to one of the greatest games ever made, and I honestly cannot wait for that upcoming DLC.